have you watched the Avicii documentary?
Yes. Who were you asking
Everyone.
to?
I know Ralph watched it.
I
Liked
actually
it.
watched it 3 days ago.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
me too. 3 or 4 days. Like, what's your thoughts on it, Dan?
Of course, we already were a little bit spoiled with the first documentary. So, and of course, I knew. No, I didn't really knew Tim, but of course, I met him a couple of times. And I knew his story, of course. So there wasn't too much new info to digest, but I definitely really liked it. Like it was definitely emotional towards the end, of course. I was hoping for a bit more background info on some newer stuff, of course,
Yeah.
like how he was feeling at the end of his life. That wasn't really, like it didn't explain that to me, and it felt a little bit rushed for 90 minutes.
Hmm.
But overall, yeah, of course, it's one of the goats of EDM, or if not EDM, but like
Yeah.
He
electronic.
is, in my
He is the
opinion,
goat.
the goat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course, like his melodies and what he did for EDM music in general.
Yeah. And you, Ralph.
yeah. I really liked it. I liked the whole tone of this documentary. It was way more. I mean, it's a tragic event in the end, but the tone was actually pretty
Yeah,
positive,
true.
and what he has contributed and what he did. For me, he already was the goat. Now I'm even a bigger fan. I think he's lonely at the top of how good he is at making electronic dance music, and nothing comes even close. Yeah, I really had a good time watching it. It was really interesting to see where we came from. We got a bit more info on how we started. Also, I never realized the Avicii Feelgood that Feelgood was a separate person, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I
so
didn't
that
know
was
that too.
fun.
What,
Yeah,
what
and
do you
I
mean?
still remember the Vicious time when they released their pretty good because when that was when we were touring Australia and everybody was talking also already about Avicii and I was like, yeah, whatever, dude,
Hmm.
bass checkers. But
Yeah, obviously.
no, yeah, it's an insane story and yeah, also insanely tragic. How cool must it have been if he would still be alive? And man, I would be so curious about what he would make now. Especially, I really liked the whole ultra event. For me, that I remember that quite vividly.
Yeah, me
I
too.
still remember, like everybody, also in the business, was talking about what
Oh
is this
yeah,
guy doing on stage?
Yeah.
What is this? And that
yeah.
really came forward in the documentary and
And I
but
really felt it how he was on his phone the whole time checking Twitter
yeah,
and just reading the same like negative comments and that was so relatable in terms of just you're so focused on the negative thing. Like
definitely,
if
yeah,
someone
yeah,
posts one negative response to your music or something, that it really gets to you. And I felt like it even hit harder at the time for him.
Is
He
definitely.
is
yeah
that something
he,
you do
he
as
really
well?
needed some kind of an artist coach at that moment, I think.
Yeah, well, to me, to be honest, like a lot of emergency bells kind of started ringing during the documentary. I
Yeah,
actually
I'm
wrote,
also really interested in your take on it
yeah.
because
Yeah,
yeah,
you
for
are
me,
the
I'm
the,
just
the
watching
expert.
in awe because he's such a good musician.
Well, I actually made a lot of notes during the documentary. I never do this, really never. But I was watching the first 10 minutes. I was like, okay, I can't remember all these things. I'm just gonna write them down. So I wrote
Hmm.
down a lot of quotes that he mentioned in the documentary, which were like red lights to me, or maybe like signs or something that I was like, this is actually something that somebody should have seen or heard about him. And I'm definitely gonna write a whole article about it because I'm not that good at talking that great about it. Like I want to spend some time
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about
You
it.
still need to process it a
Yeah,
little
so
bit.
I'm gonna write that piece probably this week. But I really liked it, and what I really liked about it, maybe you noticed, Dan, but was the documentary made? Was it already planned when he was alive? Because he does the voiceover and stuff.
That's a really good. I had the same question.
Must be
I think
right.
he did a more in-depth interview before his Ibiza show, like the last one, at
Mm.
Ushuaia. I think they used that to because he was basically doing his own
Almost everything
voiceover.
until like the literal end. So
Yeah,
it feels to me like they were already creating the documentary, and then suddenly
Yeah.
he died. But
What I understood was that also they, but I read it somewhere. I don't know if it's true.
hmm
But somebody told me that they took a lot of bits and pieces from separate interviews
mhm.
oh yeah,
and then brushed up the audio. So because it all sounded like it was the same
Yeah,
narration
narrated
being done,
voice.
but
Yeah,
apparently, but somebody wrote that on Twitter. I have no clue if it's true, but makes
it
anyway,
could be
sense.
true, of course, but
if it's true, like that was amazing to me, as in like hearing it from his own perspective, like hearing it from his own mind and thoughts, and getting the pure source, I would say.
yeah,
And to me, it was all so recognizable, as in, for those who know my story and for those who've read my book, it's a literal copy, as in, not in a bad thing, but like what he went through, I kind of
the
went
same
through in
blueprint.
like a light version, because he was much bigger than I was, and the problems were much bigger and the challenges were much bigger, but the issues that he was struggling with were completely similar to what I was going through. And that's so crazy for me to see, like it's identical, like the way how he talks about things, the things he says is the same exact thing that I thought, or the same exact thing that I was struggling with. So to me, that's so insane that it's, I believe
Yeah,
by now, after 10 years of coaching artists, it's a pattern, like I hear and see more artists of a certain level struggle with these things. So it must be.
Have you a really good example? Like he
Let me
said
check the
this.
notes.
Yeah.
I have the notes
yeah.
here.
The contrast between being Tim and being Avicii,
Yeah, well, the
and especially management wanting him to switch between those two.
well, that's the biggest thing, as in that's
Uh,
also why I believe things went wrong. Same for me. It's the identical crisis, right? It's
yeah,
it's the struggle between Avicii and the struggle between Tim, and you can literally hear him talk about it. Like, I'm just looking up the quotes that he mentioned, especially the one what he ends with, like, "Who are you? I'm Tim." As in, at that moment,
mhm.
he kind of knew there's a difference between those two personalities. Um, I'm not chasing. I was chasing happiness that wasn't mine. Also a
Yeah.
big one.
That
I
that's
didn't
deep.
like being a persona and switching between Avicii and Tim. Is what he
Yeah, that's
literally
what I mean.
mentioned. Like those type of things is exactly what I felt as well. Like maybe you recognize this as well, Dan. Like the bigger you get, the more time is being spent as Danik in your case, and the more people around you start to identify you as Danik,
Yeah,
and they
100%.
start talking to Danik and not to Dan.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's true.
if that's not something that you're aware of, it can become confusing very quickly. And to me,
But and also, I think everyone puts like a mask onto you, like the way they see you instead of you being, a person or
yeah,
something. So it's
especially with the people who don't
can
know
be.
you that well, which is most of them, right? So your fans maybe, or people around you. Um, the only thing they really see from you is the bits and pieces on social media. So, but that's Danik. That's not Dan.
Yeah, of course.
There
There's,
is some in a perfect life. I would say that's the same, right? In a perfect life, I would say the artist is the authentic self. So the artist is the authentic person.
yeah. I think people that really know me also know that I can't act. I'm not an actor or something. It's not like,
Yeah,
but what I do recognize is that, especially when you have some kind of success or status, that you kind of get a lot of adrenaline, and you yeah, I would say that. Of course, you're gonna act a little bit different when you're in your movie kind of film
yeah,
status. So, but I think the things that I showed were always genuine, but always, of course, in full on adrenaline and
yeah,
in a show kind of atmosphere. Where if I'm alone in my hotel room, then of course that's down. That's
yeah,
different. Then everything starts to go down, and you're like
yeah.
yeah, your chill self again.
Yeah, and you know, just another couple of things that I noticed, like friends and parents don't really get it because you seem to dream have the dream life, right? That's another thing. My book is literally
Yeah,
called "Unhappy in a Dream Life"
yeah.
for a reason. Um, as an artist, you should see yourself as a character completely different as yourself, is what he said. Like, I'm not sure if that's the right way to do it.
No, I think management said that to him. I think that's what I
Oh, okay, yeah, that
took
could
from
be.
it,
My notes
but
could be off.
I'm not 100% sure. Also, I think that the way they portrayed Ash this time was way different than the first documentary,
Yeah, true.
which I find
Definitely.
I think that
interesting
has
because
to
in
be
the
thought
first
of. You know, like there must have been a
yeah, in the first
conversation.
documentary, it felt like he was more like the bad guy,
Yeah.
and in this document, no, we tried everything. We even did like interventions and stuff. I was like, okay,
You know,
Yeah.
you don't know what the truth is, but I
no,
didn't like the last documentary because it all almost tried to blame somebody for what happened, you know. And I think it's also just tragic that, I mean, there's nobody per se maybe to blame.
no,
I really don't know. But last in the previous documentary, like everybody afterwards was talking like, "Whoa, that Ash was a big motherfucker,"
Mm.
and and this time it was actually my my take actually was, well, whoa, dude, he's a really good manager actually,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. No, I felt the same.
because that's the kind of manager you want on your side. And then you also want somebody else. Of course, he has an incentive to let you do as much as possible, and on the other end you must have somebody who kind of calms that down. And
Balances it out.
in the
Yeah,
first part I was amazed by the documentary, but later on that was reversed. The first part I was always thinking he was on tour with his entourage, but I never saw his parents. And for me, that was like, wow, his parents. I saw his dad talking, like really collected and calm, and about his son, which is also pretty admirable. And but then later on, you saw him also on stage with Tim, and so that was gone because at first I thought, if only his parents would go with him and keep him grounded, you know, because usually the parents are one of the key factors in keeping people grounded. I think that's also in Robert's case quite an important figure. I
Garrix.
know in Martijn's case, his parents are important figures,
Yeah. They
and
most of the time know you best, right? Like
yeah.
in most cases.
And for me, actually, that was the most tragic thing because then afterwards, in conclusion of the documentary, it seemed like his parents were really involved. And then I was like, oh shit! And then still it goes wrong. You
Mm.
know, that was maybe one of the most, especially as being a parent. Yeah, you think if you're there, you can always be there and help them. But yeah, apparently,
Yeah. Super
it's not so
tough.
simple.
One of the
No.
things that really hit me was that he said, like, I think that was around the end where he said, "This is how my ideal life looks like, content." And to me, that really hit, as in what he also mentions, like he was trying to achieve more and more in life, right? Like doing more gigs, more success, more money. And he also mentioned in the documentary, like he was already happy when he was able to pay for the cab or something. It's
Mhm.
yeah.
such a simple thing, but
That already gave him
the
freedom or
feeling
something.
of
He said,
freedom was already like years back when he was able to pay for a cab without worrying about it.
yeah,
And that to me was kind of like that's the struggle for most people, like the human greed you might have, or the it's never enough mentality, right? So
mm,
my perfect life is content, is being content. That kind of
with what I have.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so,
kind of
yeah,
set the tone to me.
Yeah, but in
So
the end, he was never content. It's
well, by the
so
end he
sad.
looked content to me. That's what's weird to me. Like if you look at the last part, he looks happy.
He looks better.
Yeah,
You
but he
know,
also
yeah.
at some
He looked
point
way more
he looked
spiritual.
like a ghost, and
yeah,
but he looked better, but yeah, still maybe not good. I mean, it's all relative because maybe if you would if you saw his pictures as being a kid, he looked better than he did at the end.
yeah.
But yeah, he looked way better than he did in the middle.
Hmm.
But still, yeah, it's. I think it's a good
Yeah,
thing
he
that
was
we don't
basically killing
understand what was
himself.
going through his
With
head. But
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
not taking care of his body, not taking care of his health, not a, and his mental health, of course, and then just keep on grinding. And probably those shows, I think he had fun, but it's just like he was on that roller coaster the whole time
Yeah.
without stopping, without thinking, without feeling anything.
Yeah, but at some
Used a lot
point
of
they
tools,
only
of
did
course.
like 40 shows a year. That's what
Yeah,
Ash
in the end,
told.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Well, if you haven't seen it yet, make sure to check it out because I think it's very valuable for every artist out there to check,
yeah.
just to be aware of what could happen, right? Like it's not like it's
yeah,
going to happen anyway, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And it's a beautiful documentary, in my opinion.
yeah. What also struck me is, and that's also a thing we didn't talk about. It's the habit of drugs, and
Yeah.
that he at first was what feel good. He kind of like total reversed because at first he was like even opposed to weed. He was opposed to doing drugs and all that stuff. And later on, I think it also be that the drugs just fucked him up so badly that they were beyond a point of no return.
Hmm.
It's just guessing. I don't know
He was also
if so,
mentioning.
but
I also wrote that down, like that things were going. What's stroef ook alweer in English?
Yeah,
Tough,
tough.
like
Like
things were going tough without alcohol, and with just a few glasses of alcohol, like the sharp
you
edges
loosen
were
up.
taken off, right?
but that's really recognizable. That
Yeah, of
Exactly,
I've
course.
seen. Like that's what
exactly.
Marlon did.
But that's the same thing. One of the things that I also recognized back then,
Yeah,
as at an early age, I also did like 2 3 drinks before I went on and did the show because it just makes things a little bit more easy, right? And it's just like an entry drug, you could say. Like it
Hmm.
might start there, and if you're a bit more easy for addiction or something, like I'm not very how do you say that, like adaptive to
yeah. You don't get
addiction.
addicted
Yeah,
to.
not that quick, at least that I know. But if you are, then that's like the killer drug, right? So
Yeah, of course.
yeah, it's there's a lot of
Becomes a
things
habit.
in there, and I'm definitely gonna dive deeper into it. But it's a must see, in my opinion.